Hi, I'm Danny White. I'd like to talk to you today about some safety awareness training that we need to present for working in the Forney Labs. I'm a certified safety manager, and I am also the director of race operations for the evGrand Prix. I would like to cover for a minute just a little bit about the training outline. First, we're going to do a little bit of introduction. We're going to talk about the Building Emergency Response Plan. We're going to talk about REM, hazard communication and the right to know, some laboratory safety, and some additional training requirements that you'll need. Let me begin with an introduction. What we want you to do is to go home every day in the same condition that you came to school or work. You, and only you, have the responsibility for your own safety. Your actions can also impact the safety of others in Forney or in Potter or any other lab on campus as you work. Let's talk about the Building Emergency Response Plan. The Building Emergency Response Plan is specific to Forney. The Building Emergency Response Plan provides basic information for building evacuations and shelter-in-place events. Copies of the Building Emergency Response Plan can be found in Linda Davis's office or on the Chemical Engineering Safety website. If you work in another building, contact the building deputy for that building to review the Building Emergency Response Plan. Let's talk a little bit about Emergency Procedures Handbook. The Emergency Procedures Handbook, or EPH as it's called, applies to the university and describes the procedures to follow for a variety of emergencies. You can get a copy of this at the following website. Let's talk for a minute about building evacuations. A fire alarm is an alarm that goes off in the building. It is a shrill alarm accompanied by flashing lights in most locations. In the case of a fire alarm, you will evacuate the building as follows. Calmly proceed to the nearest exit. Exits are located on the ground and first floors. Do not use the elevators. Take your personal belongings with you if possible. Assist those who would need help if possible. Once outside, congregate at the awards tower between Forney and the MSEE building or in the MSEE atrium during foul weather. Stay at the tower until instructed by emergency personnel that it is safe to re-enter the building. As you review this slide, you will notice the red X is an evacuation point for good weather conditions during any kind of evacuation that we have. The blue X, on the other hand, shows you in the MSEE building where to go for inclement weather, whether it's rain or snow, high winds, whatever. So again, to reiterate, the red X shows you where to gather when you evacuate the building for a fire alarm, any type of alarm activity that requires an evacuation. And the blue X is if we have inclement weather. Let's talk a little bit about shelter in place. A shelter in place alarm is an alarm that goes off outside the building. It is a siren or horn. In the case of a shelter in place alarm, you will remain in the building as follows. Move to the basement in the new wing of the building. Use one of the 3 staircases in the Forney atrium, adjacent to the exit that faces physics, or adjacent to the exit facing civil engineering. Do not use the elevators. Take your personal belongings if possible, and assist those who need help if possible. Stay in the shelter location until instructed by emergency personnel that it is safe to leave. Let's discuss notification. Notification during an emergency is very critical. In normal emergencies, you would dial 911 on a campus phone. I urge you to put in the 765-494-8221 on your cell phone. In the majority of events, you get a much faster response by dialing direct to Purdue Police at the 765-494-8221 number. On non-emergencies, there's the numbers listed for the Purdue Fire Department, the Purdue Police Department, the campus medical facility, and REM. Let's cover radiological and environmental management, or REM as I refer to them. REM serves as a consultant to the university community in the areas of construction, health and safety, environmental health, fire and safety equipment service, hazardous materials management, industrial hygiene, laser safety, radiation safety, and general safety and ergonomics. As we move forward, we'll address hazard communication and community right to know. Simply, HAZCOM states that you have the right to be informed about the known health and physical hazards in your workplace, to be trained to use proper safety techniques and hygiene practices, and to inform your DTI about accidents or hazardous situations in your work area without fear of repercussion from your supervisor or the university. You also have a responsibility to use the available information and to stay informed about the hazards in your work area, to use the safety techniques and hygiene practices as a routine part of your daily activities, and to attend HAZCOM training. As we move forward with hazard communication and community right to know, some of the program requirements are employee training, material safety data sheets, keeping a chemical inventory, and employee exposure records. And last but not least, labeling. If you pour anything in a container other than its original container, it must have a label on it describing what's in it and the hazards that's in it. The written compliance manual is located in Linda Davis's office. Chemical inventories, employee exposure records, and MSDSs are located in our laboratories. Continuing on with HAZCOM, hazardous chemicals that you may encounter: solvents, acids, bases. And to kind of finish up a little bit with HAZCOM, the products in your work area may also pose physical hazards. They may be flammable, corrosive, reactive, explosive, or some other type of hazard. Review the MSDS, understand the chemical and physical hazards, and wear the proper PPE. There is a section in every material safety data sheet that tells you what is the proper personal protective equipment that is recommended by the chemicals manufacturer. If you use WD-40 as an example, if you use it in its original intended fashion as a lubricant, it does not require an MSDS because it is sold as a consumer product. The second you use it in any kind of industrial fashion, then it requires a material safety data sheet. So, to better be safe than sorry, any chemical that you enter into a lab, first you must check and make sure that it's listed on the chemical inventory. If it is not, then you have to come to myself, Danny White, or Steve Dunlap to get that chemical approved. We will have to change the chemical inventory sheet and add the new material safety data sheet into the binder and do any necessary training that is required for that particular chemical before you can ever bring it into the lab. So please do not bring anything into the lab that is not listed on our chemical inventory. Continuing on with our lengthy topic of HAZCOM and right to know, material safety data sheets, or MSDSs, provides information specific to the chemical or mixture of chemicals that you would be using. They are provided by the manufacturer or the distributor. See the handout, How to Read and Understand the MSDS. As we finish up with this lengthy topic of hazard communication and community right to know, let's talk about labeling. Let's look at incoming containers. They're labeled by the manufacturer or the distributor. There's minimal information: the name, the manufacturer, the address, a little bit of hazard information. You should add the owner's name and the date received. Secondary container labels that are available in the receiving area in Forney in G134 are for chemicals that are developed in laboratories. They're for chemical waste, or triple risk containers for disposal. All containers in Forney must be labeled. Let's talk for a minute about laboratory safety, like working in the lab, fire extinguishers, eye wash and safety shower, your personal protective equipment, how to handle waste, sharps handling, and housekeeping. As we move forward with working in the lab, no one should work in the laboratory alone. Always have another person with you. Safety glasses must be worn at all times while you are in our laboratories. Even if you're working on a computer in the laboratory, you are in a hazardous area. Headphones, including earbuds, are not allowed to be worn while working in our labs. Let's look at fire extinguishers. Every laboratory is equipped with a fire extinguisher. It's located near the entrance to the laboratory. The fire extinguishers are intended to be used by emergency personnel only. You are not trained to use a fire extinguisher. Evacuate and call 911. In the event of a fire, your best course of action is to exit the lab, immediately pull the nearest fire alarm, and evacuate the building. The Purdue Fire Department will respond in less than 5 minutes. Let's talk for a minute about emergency eye wash locations. Most laboratories are equipped with an emergency eye wash. Locate the nearest eye wash to your work area. As an eye wash procedure, put your face into the water spraying from the eye wash. Hold your eyelids open and flush your eyes for 15 minutes minimum. Other occupants of the lab should dial 911 for emergency assistance. And remember, all eye washes should be flushed weekly due to poor water quality. So if you've not done so, anytime I use an eye wash, I let it run for just a minute before I place the person's eyes into the eye wash. So please remember that. Give it just a minute to flush any impurities out before you actually start flushing the eyes. This is actually what an emergency eye wash looks like. This is a standalone unit, and it's usually associated with this sink. What does OSHA recommend to protect you from hazards? Protection from hazards is accomplished by, number one, and the most preferred method over all other controls, is engineering controls. And that's done so because they are generally less prone to human error. Examples are general ventilation, fume hoods, self-closing vehicle restraints, etc. Administrative controls would be the second option. They're necessary where engineering controls are not possible or practical. An example would be rules, policies, procedures, and emergency plans. Third on the list is personal protective equipment, or PPE, and other safety equipment. Safety equipment, including PPE, is a subclass of administrative controls since it depends on human cooperation and rules and policies regarding its use. PPE is not an acceptable substitute for engineering and administrative controls. Let's take a look at personal protective equipment for a minute. The first step is to identify the specific hazard in the workplace. Many of the hazards are quite obvious, but a formal hazard assessment must still be performed. The hazard assessment is required by law and creates well-organized written protocols for worker protection. The hazard assessment identifies PPE that is worn to reduce or minimize the exposure or contact to injurious physical, chemical, or biological agents. Hazards are not eliminated by PPE, but the risk of injury can be eliminated or grossly reduced. As we're moving forward with personal protective equipment, let's look at eye protection. If you're in a lab, you must wear eye protection, whether that be safety glasses, goggles, or face shield, or a combination of all the above. On skin protection, you wear long pants, closed-toed shoes, gloves, and a lab coat. Let's talk for a minute about hazardous waste handling. We are committed at Purdue University to not polluting our environment, whether that be air, water, or landfills. We are also committed to protecting the individuals who handle the waste that we generate. Waste is classified as either non-hazardous or hazardous. Moving on with some waste handling, the non-hazardous waste. Detailed information on what is hazardous and what is non-hazardous can be found on the RIM Chemical Waste Disposal website. If your unwanted chemical is on that website and listed as non-hazardous, either sink dispose or sewer dispose of it with running water, or send insoluble non-hazardous solids to the regular trash with a label on the container stating the chemical name plus the words non-hazardous, safe for regular trash. Let's look at housekeeping for a minute. Practice good housekeeping to prevent hazards from developing in your laboratory. Numerous injuries are caused by poor housekeeping habits. Make sure you put everything back, keep the place clean, and keep the egress aisles clear from anything. Let's look at some additional training requirements. You probably should read the Purdue Chemical Hygiene Plan and the Hazardous Materials Safety Manual, and they are located at the following website. Remember, this is an OSHA requirement. For those that are grad students in Forney, you would want to complete the following test to become Forney Safety Lab Certified. For those who do not remain in Forney or not taking classes in Forney, watch the Lab Safety, Shop Safety video and take the quiz at the end. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for your attention to follow along with the Forney Lab Safety program.